Good evening. This is On the Campaign Trail. Every week in the long run up to Election Day, we track key issues, moments, and personalities. But we want to be clear about the map we use. We know that the democratic project is in great danger, and that shapes how we navigate our way to 2022. It isn't just elections as usual. On the campaign trail seeks to make sense of the 2022 elections in that context of democratic decay. We want to discern patterns in the election landscape, understand paths to victory, discuss relevant policies, seek useful perspectives, while keenly aware that the anti democratic clock is ticking. In 2022, hashtag we decide. Without neglecting the other basic questions, on the campaign trail, we'll ask how we decide and why we decide. Good evening. I'm John Nery, and you're on the campaign trail. Our first guest is the President of the Senate, four term Senator Vicente Tito Soto. Good evening, Senate
Good evening.
President Soto. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening, sir. John, good evening. Good evening to one and all.
Let me start with a basic question. Why are you running for VP? After 24 years in the Senate and four terms, why not run for the presidency?
Well, it's a combination perhaps of myself trying to be humble as possible. I I always practice humility, and it might be too tall an order because I think I would be very effective as vice president, considering the fact that after 24 years in the Senate, my partner and I, Senator Ping Lacson, together 42 years, pag pinagsama kami dalawa. I feel that the laws that we have crafted, as far as execution is concerned, there is much to be desired. So why not offer ourselves to the people that we execute these laws? Ang tingin ko, who best would be the executioner, the executive, better than the ones who crafted the law. Parang ganon. And then my expertise as far as the issue of drug abuse and illegal drugs is concerned could be very effective. I could be very effective as a vice president. That is one of the reasons why.
You did say it was a combination of reasons. But why Senator Ping for president? Why not you? I mean, what was that discussion like with your brother in arms?
Um, in public service, together we would have 83 years. He had 52 years. I have 31 as of 2022. So he had more time in the executive department than I. You know, that's one. The other thing is that his program, and I have adopted the program. We have adopted together. We have adopted both program. The Brave program, BRAVE, I think is very powerful, and it is the, if I may say so, the silver bullet that the country needs. BRAVE, Brave, stands for Budget Reform Advocacy for Village Empowerment. We, after passing the budget for 24 years, scrutinizing it, dissecting it, we have seen the ills, and we have formulated. Senator Lacson, of course, started it. He started the formula of being able to solve most of the ills that we see in the preparation of the budget and in the execution of the budget. Ayun eh. So I think he would do he would make a good president. At saka ano yun eh, he's tough. He's a real decision maker. I would say that we have probably have the same traits, but I think his background and being former chief of the PNP would give him more edge than I would have as president.
Senator, I'm just struck by your use of the phrase "silver bullet." Um, haven't we had enough of the silver bullets promised by President Duterte? You know, fixing drugs in 3 to 6 months and so on.
Well, what I've heard before during the campaign of 2016 and even up to now are no silver bullets. There are no explanations of how the silver bullet is and how it can become a silver bullet. Unlike our proposal, which is balancing the budget, reform the budget, make use of the budget, and make the budget reach the people. Unlike what's happening now, we have practically developed in this number of years, and it's not confined to the administration of President Duterte. It goes way back. We have developed the policy of mendicancy. Walang ginawa kundi manghingi sa sa national government katulad ngayon, merong FLR for later release. That's the reason some of the mayors, or not some, most of the mayors and governors are silent on who they are backing up or who they would want to support. Hindi pa nare-release yung mga budget nila. That's not the way to go. That's not the solution. The solution is that the budget, the needs should come from the people, from the barangay level, bottom-up budgeting, and execute it well without
So I take
any
it.
tinge of corruption. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
So I take it that you're going to remove that policy for later release, which has really been abused. Um,
Yes,
is that right?
definitely. Yes, definitely. And the program, if I may be allowed to explain a little bit more, um, the the way the national expenditure program is crafted now by the past presidents and up to now, they would give the departments, the different departments, a ceiling. Like for example, let's say the DepEd, they will give 350 billion ceiling. The DPWH to 300 billion. The DOST 100 billion. So on and so forth. It's a ceiling, and the executives there would start to fill it, try to fill it up. Kahit hindi kailangan. At ipipilit that is the reason why we have 300 to 400 billion unspent every year. Now the solution is to run the government like a private corporation. And how do they do it? They do it zero. They start from zero, no ceiling. They start from zero. They ask the barangay or their executives in this case, or the workers. But in the government's case, you ask the barangay, what do you need? You ask the mayors, what do you need? The district areas or the provinces, the regions, you bottom up. So what you will be doing every year would be what they need. The national expenditure program would be fit. It will not be necessary for us to borrow a lot of money because we have to fill up the original NEP asks for. Na pagdating naman sa GAB or the General Appropriations Bill when it arrives to the House of Representatives before it's sent to the Senate, it's again jumbled. Not really. Let me give you an example, a perfect example, to be very concrete about it. In Surigao, there was a mayor that has been there for this is an experience of Senator Lacson and myself, two terms already. He's been asking for a road that will bring his crops closer to the market quickly, instead of what's happening. Even the fishermen would be going around such a huge area, such a long area, pagdating doon sa palengke, panis na or laos na yung produkto nila. So he has been asking this for this road for so many years. One time, DPWH and a contractor arrived and they were setting it up. So he was very happy and asked them, oh, so finally, this is the road that I have been asking for. Alam mo, sabi nung kontratista, no, ano ito, Mayor, widening. Anong widening? Walang kalsada, widening. Oh, that they did it. Right now, the tricycles are using the left and right, but there's no street in the middle. You see the disconnect? It's happening in many places. There's a bridge to nowhere. There is this, so on and so forth, that's unnecessary. So, because it did not come from below. That is the reason why we are proposing a bottom-up budgeting proposal. And that is the essence of BRAVE, Budget Reform Advocacy for Village Empowerment. You bring the
Senator,
money to the people.
yeah, Senator, maybe we can have a separate program to discuss the budget in detail. Didn't we already practice bottom up budgeting under the Aquino administration, the second Aquino administration?
But the ceiling was still there. You know, the bottom-up budgeting was, I think they were trying to practice that. But then again, I think it was lost along the way, unless I don't remember how they did it, but it's been carried over into the present dispensation.
Senator, with all this budget talk, I'm reminded that in fact you are discussing the budget right now. You're in the
Yes,
Senate office. You
yes.
just left the Senate hall to join us. So thank you for making
I
time.
have to excuse myself. Yes, I told
Yeah,
them that I was having a discussion with you.
thank you. Senator, if I could bring back the discussion to the
Uh,
election situation, it's
mhm.
already late in the day. It's November, but the field still seems very fluid. First of all, are you and your standard bearer, Senator Ping, committed to go all the way to May 9?
Oh yes, yes. We were the first to decide. We made up our minds early. We know what we can do, we know what we want to do, and we know how to do it. And so we have decided no backtracking, no second thoughts, no conditions. We have started to offer ourselves to the peoples as early as the first week of August when we decided. That was after a visit to a number of big provinces and talking to government officials, local officials, businessmen, religious sector, youth sector. We had a talk with most of them, and we saw that there is a need for our joining the race. But during that time, we were the first ones. We announced early,
That's
and we
right.
have decided early.
But does that preclude any of you from joining another team, another tandem, or it's the two of you?
Yeah, it's the two of us. I don't think there's any way. We've tried it before. We've tried it early on. I mean, they tried it early on. Senator Manny Pacquiao came to us and talked to the two of us, Senator Lacson and I. And Senator Lacson proposed something to the effect of the same proposal he said to Vice President Leni Robredo
Mhm.
when Vice President Leni Robredo came to see us. And that was that if you want a united opposition or united group, Senator Lacson said, let us all file. And then when the let's say February or March comes, the one who has the highest rating, let's support all that, and perhaps support a single vice presidential candidate. That was the proposal of Senator Lacson. But Manny Pacquiao did not say yes, but he did not say no. He said he was going to think about it.
Mhm.
Vice President Leni Robredo, who was accompanied then by former Senator Bamakino, rejected the idea. They rejected the proposal. We didn't know why.
Senator,
Yes.
if I may ask, do you consider yourselves opposition? So
Uh,
the proposal of Senator Ping was to
no,
create a united opposition
the
front.
proposal of Senator Ping was not the word united opposition did not come from him. It came from those who were trying to uh, come up with a united front or united opposition against the possible administration candidates. That's what they were saying. But in our case, and we've always told them, and I've said it before,
Mhm.
I'm not, we're not anti-administration, but we're not pro-opposition. We're pro-Filipino. We stand for something else. We stand for what we think is necessary for the country. Parang ganun yung mentality namin eh. So we don't really consider ourselves opposition, but definitely we're not administration. And
So,
the rumor before that we were enablers of Duterte is definitely a silly idea.
can we? I'd like to get back to that point about enabling and so on. And but I wanna I wanna revisit what you just said, Senator. So what was your or Senator Ping's political position when you had talks with Vice President Leni Robredo?
Um,
If it was, pro
they
Filipino,
were
so
trying to what the way we understood the point of the Vice President Robredo then was that they wanted to form a an alliance or a coalition or something like that, no? And the idea was thrown in by Senator Lacson that we all file, and whoever has a good rating, let's try. I think Senator Lacson was actually trying to find out the sincerity of those who are proposing it. So again, there was a second meeting, and in the second meeting, um, it was Senator Drilon who was who accompanied Vice President Robredo in our meeting, and the we sensed, in so many words, no, we sensed that they would want they want the that Vice President Leni Robredo be the candidate that the alliance will support. That's how we sensed it,
all right.
and
Thank
that's
you.
why that when Senator Dillon said that we did not arrive at an agreement, we just supported that statement that he said. Yes, indeed, we did not arrive on an agreement, and we did not elaborate anymore on what transpired para hindi na rin medyo magkahiyaan.
To bring our discussion back to current events, can I ask for your take on the still developing situation with Bongbong Marcos and Inday Sara Duterte?
I hope you don't mind, but my partner and I have agreed not to give reactions or comments about the other candidates. That's why if we're asked about a certain candidate or this and that, we always try to dispense ourselves from commenting. We have decided to focus on our programs, focus on what we can offer, our platform, and focus on our candidacy and talk about the candidacy
I,
and
I
not
was
talk about the others.
I was going to ask you, who would you rather run against, the junior Marcos or the junior Duterte?
I'm sorry, really. I'd rather not. I'd rather not answer, John. I
I
have not
understand.
really. The reason I am saying I'm sorry is I have not given it a thought. Your question, well, I don't know. I'd rather not. I'd rather not think about it.
Senator, if I can ask you about something that's not directly related to the elections, but may have an impact on the elections. So
Mm-hmm.
there was this a PDEA raid in Davao de Oro. You were once chair of the Dangerous Drugs Board. What do
Mm-mm.
you make of the controversy? I mean, it was an apparently selective PDEA raid. Some people were allowed to go, and then 17 people were arrested. And those who were arrested said there were other people. Um,
Well, I think there should be a thorough investigation. If an inquiry is necessary, then we should go for it. Um, a thorough investigation would be you. That is one thing that I was not able to elaborate earlier. No, if you don't mind, John.
mhm.
One of the reasons I would rather run for the vice presidency is because whether I'm given a job or not. But of course, if Senator Lacson and I win, yeah, he's going to. I will remove his headache from the headache of the problem of drug abuse and illegal drugs. And precisely like, for example, that raid in Davao de Oro, no, if I'm not mistaken. No? I'm not too
That's right.
familiar with what happened, but look at what's happening. Uh, Drugs are still proliferating. But have to give it to the administration. They have been very focused on enforcement, quite successful, as a matter of fact, when it comes to enforcement. Much to be desired in prosecution, but none at all on prevention and rehabilitation. And you can't do without it. You cannot solve the problem of illegal drugs if you do not solve the problem of drug abuse. Because the day we stop buying is the day they will stop selling. You see, so that is the program that I am infusing, and I will infuse in the office of the vice president. I will remove the headache of the president from the problem of illegal drugs and drug abuse because of the advocacy in the program that I know, that I have researched, that I have included in the Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, Republic Act 9165, of which I am the principal author of, creating the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, which is again not being executed well. So if we become the executives, I think we will be able to do justice to the law and how these raids and how this drug abuse prevention program is being should be done, I should say, because it's not being done at all. So again, konektado
Senator,
na naman yan. Kaya may mga raid na ganyan eh. It doesn't stop. Why? Because there's a buyer. You kill all the pushers, tomorrow there's a new pusher. And look at what's happening there in Davao de Oro. It's even in the backyard of the president.
so, Senator, we have about 2 minutes left. Your answer
Mhm.
now just reminded me that I had another question that I was going to circle back to. So I'm going
Mm.
to join them together. The question of enabling. Senator, your answer, your description of the enforcement part of the Duterte administration as competently done and so on, I think
To
will
a
help.
certain extent. To a certain
Yes,
extent. Okay.
will help reinforce the beliefs of some that you have, despite your protection of the Senate's institutional dignity, have served as an enabler for the Duterte administration. I mean, so many people have been killed, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's not going to happen in our administration. Um, for one thing, because as I said, we should be heavy on prevention and rehabilitation. It's a lot. Believe me, it is a more successful approach. It is a holistic approach. Enforcement, as I said, to some extent, they have been successful because there were a number of big time drug traffickers that were arrested or that were eliminated. No, but yeah, as far as the pushers are concerned, you remove one today or you kill one tomorrow. The next day there will be a new one. So that's not the correct approach. It's
So,
part. It's part of the approach. It should be. There are four major concerns. All right, enforcement, which they are doing. Prosecution, there is much to be desired, and then prevention and rehabilitation, which is far more important. Believe me, if we do this, you will be able to solve the problem of illegal drugs.
Senator, allow me to ask two more questions. I
Yes.
see that despite very favorable overall numbers in the latest Pulse Asia survey, you have a relatively low voter preference rate in Mindanao at around 10%. What explains that, and what are you going to do to bring that up?
Well, fortunately, we have three major groups that are now being formed into an alliance. No, that is heavy in Mindanao. The group of Bebot Alvarez, Reforma, and Senator Lacson, who is now chairman. Bebot Alvarez is the president. NUP, the National Unity Party of Secretary Rani Puno, and many congressmen. And then my political party, which I'm the chairman of, the Nationalist People's Coalition or NPC. Sa salitang Tagalog or sa salitang kalsada namin ng mga politiko, ngayon pa lang kami naglalatag. Pero nakalatag kami. I'm very confident that in the days to come, in the weeks to come, yung nilalatag namin, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, will be felt.
Thank you. Senator, my last question. Uh,
Yes,
you
sir.
you heard my opening spiel. Do you agree that the Philippines is undergoing what scholars call democratic decay? That we are in fact facing a crisis?
Let me put it in another way, if you don't mind. Yes, I do agree with what you said, but let me put it this way. Um, if the Philippines is a patient, we are in the ICU. Now, when you're in the ICU, who will you choose for a doctor? Yung bagong graduate o yung may expertise na? Ganun yung, ganun yung thinking namin. So, yes, nasa ICU tayo. Pandemic, utang, Bandaras ruling na hindi pa sigurado kung paano namin gagawin, kung paano namin i-elaborate dito ngayon sa budget. The 13 trillion debt, the problem on peace and order, the problem on corruption, uh, and many more. Nasa ICU tayo eh.
Senator, still so many more questions to ask, but I've already taken up too much of your time. Thank you. I hope to have you back on the show one of these
Sure, sure.
days.
So one of these days,
Uh,
perhaps when my figures in Mindanao get better. Sige.
Thank you very much, Senate
You're
President Tito
welcome. Thank you,
Soto.
John. Thank you.
Senate President Tito Soto, who was just with us, is once again doing very well in the surveys. In the last Pulse Asia poll conducted in September, he was the first choice of 25%, a plurality of voters, for vice president. How do surveys work? More important, how should we, as citizens and as voters, use surveys? We are joined tonight by two experts, the president of Pulse Asia, Ronnie Holmes, a political scientist, and UP political science professor Jean Encinas Franco. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello,
Good
good
evening,
evening,
John. Good evening,
Jan. Good
Jin.
evening, Ronnie.
So, let me just segue from the first segment. Professor Ronnie, what
Yep.
explains Tito Soto's high voter preference rates?
I think a number of things, at least the events that transpired before the survey, as well as the fact that he is nationally prominent, not only as Senate President, having served several terms, but also he has been known to be a host, part of a long-running television show. He was the first one to declare also. And even in the State of the Nation address of the president, President Duterte acknowledged that he can be a good candidate for the vice presidency. So in that case, he had the advantage over all others who filed for the vice presidency later on.
Thank you. Professor Franco, um, The September survey showed that Tito Soto was ahead of the president himself. Another, in fact, the most nationally prominent personality we have. Uh, what did you make of that finding? That President Duterte, after he said he was thinking of running for vice president, received this rude awakening through the surveys.
Yeah, I guess the president must have suffered from the idea that both Sarah and him would be running, and I guess people don't seem to like the idea, no, of a father and daughter running in the same election for national post. So that seemed to have turned off some voters. The other reason is perhaps also the ongoing pandemic, no, which has affected a lot of people, a lot of people lost their jobs. Some have been displaced or even are underemployed.
Thank you. Professor Holmes, can you help demystify the survey process? What happens? What do you do? What's the cycle like, and so on?
Well, basically, the survey process is really just to take a representative sample of the population. The sample changes from our surveys. In the previous survey, we had 2,400 respondents. So we select them randomly. We cover basically four areas. These are NCR, the rest of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And then subsequently, in order to generalize, we adopt a weighting procedure so that the results will be calculated based on the proportion of the population, share of the population of those areas that have been selected. And this has been done over the last several years by Pulse and by many other organizations. As long as the survey is randomly done or probabilistically done, where everyone has the same chance of being selected as a respondent, then you can say that it can be representative of the entire population. Although our surveys are cross-sectional, so that means if it's cross-sectional, it's a snapshot of a particular period of time. It may not necessarily continue in the next survey. So there's no such thing as really discerning a pattern across our surveys because they're really just snapshots of how people think at the time that we conducted the survey.
Professor Holmes, how do you respond to attacks against your organization? For instance, false Asia, people not believing in your survey numbers and so on. What do you say to them?
Well, we stand by the integrity of our survey. We do believe that there are those attacks are unfair, they're baseless. We get it from several groups. Regardless of the administration, we get attacked for coming up with data that basically some people are not in any way happy about. I think it's par for the course in the case of pollsters, although the attacks more recently have been a bit more vicious than they have been in the past. But as I said, it's really part of the job. It's the risk that is involved in terms of taking the pulse of the public.
Thank you. Professor Franco, what does that criticism of Pulse Asia, as false Asia and so on, what does that say about our political culture or about our approach to surveys?
Well, I guess if you think about it, it's relatively new, no? Yung surveys, and I guess it still has to be in the minds of people that some surveys are more carefully produced, some are not, and that's why some people are actually skeptical about surveys. But that doesn't mean that surveys should not be a feature of our democracy, because I believe that it's a very important institution of democracy in the sense that uh, people are guided as to the major issues of the day, who to vote for, or what are the how are their candidates faring in terms of in the run up to the elections.
How should a citizen or a voter use surveys, Professor Franco?
Well, it depends on which organization is conducting the survey. I guess just verify first and then trust. But I understand that not all people have the time to actually learn about how surveys are done, and I'm very happy that Ronnie has explained it in more detail than what we normally read, no, in press releases. So yeah, I guess verify and trust, and just look at surveys as a mere guide as to how your candidates are faring. But at the end of the day, examine the platform and track record of the candidates, and not be swayed by surveys.
Professor Holmes, I'm struck by the ability of surveys to reflect a thinking voter, or rather that the electorate is making distinctions. So, for instance, former Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano, very low ratings for the presidency, very low ratings for the vice presidency, but very high ratings for the Senate. Is it accurate? Is it correct for me to see that as the electorate making a distinction? This person, not good for that position or this position, but okay with this other position. Is that a right way of using the survey findings?
Yeah, that might be a proper way in terms of assessing the survey findings. The other thing is that with regard to the presidential and the vice presidential race, if you put the name of, let's say, Congressman Alan Peter Cayetano, Representative Alan Peter Cayetano, among a roster of candidates, they tend to prefer other candidates rather than him, because there are other candidates, for example, who may actually be running for the Senate, but were in the past gaining more support than Alan Peter Cayetano, not only for the presidency, but even for the Senate race. So one way to read it is what you said, John, that people may think that, the Cayetano name is more associated with the Senate and it's better for him to gain support for his senatorial run rather than they expressing preference for him either in the presidential or the vice presidential race.
I seem to remember, I hope I'm not mistaken, but there was a time when Grace Poe was a newly prominent national figure that people preferred her as vice president, but not as president. I don't know if I remember that finding correctly, but would that be an instance of the electorate or at least the survey respondents making a distinction between decisions for a particular candidate?
I think it would be fair to infer that the some voters would really make the decisions in terms of the what they feel would be the appropriate position for a name that we rostered among the potential candidates. The other thing is that even with regard to their stated preference, let's say for a survey, one of the things that we note in the survey is that that preference is not that firm. When we ask the question as to what's the possibility of them changing their preference, many of the candidates at the point that we conducted the survey, let's say in September 2021, which is about 9 months before the next election,
Mhm.
would say that there's a big possibility of changing their votes. This to me indicates really that for many Filipinos, the final decision might come closer to the elections, at least for the single winner competition, and even in terms of the fill-up rate for the Senate.
Mhm. Professor Franco, you spoke of surveys as an institution of democracy. Do we need more surveys? Like, I don't know, weekly surveys? Or do
I
we
don't.
need fewer of them?
Uh, Probably periodic, but what I tried to advocate this in one webinar that I spoke in. Siguro it's no better. I mean, siguro disaggregation of findings, like probably it should be disaggregated by sex in terms of the responses of the of the respondents, like how many people, how many men and women would vote for this certain candidate, how many men and women said that, for instance, the drug anti-drug war of uh, policy of Duterte is good or bad, because my sense is that if we do not disaggregate the data, then we make women's concerns invisible. Pwede ba yun, Ronnie? Is that possible?
Well, our data is really disaggregated in terms of several social demographic groups, male, female, age groups, so anywhere from 18 to 24 to 65 and above. And that disaggregation, although we don't report it out in our media
Yeah.
releases, is
Mm-mm.
readily shared with our subscribers and even with academics who request us for the data.
Mm.
Since
Yeah.
we're basically academics also running a survey,
Yes.
in this
Yes.
case.
Oo.
So,
Yeah.
Professor Holmes, maybe I can ask you the same question. Irrespective of cost, should we run more surveys like on a weekly basis?
I think it depends on the type of survey that you're running, John, because there are some surveys that have to be done in such a way that they conform to the standards in the social sciences. And then you have to be very frank about the extent by which you can use the survey to generalize for the entire population. As I said, there are two ways by which you conduct surveys. You can either select your respondents randomly or select them purposively. If you select them randomly and you follow the rules of randomization or probabilistic sampling, then that can be generalized. But if you are not engaged in probabilistic sampling, be very careful about reporting your survey results. Because, for example, surveys done online, which also are costly, which also have costs, not as costly as face-to-face surveys, are have a self-selection bias. Only the ones who actually wish to answer a survey are the ones who actually participate in the survey, and that cannot be used as a means of generalizing that the opinion expressed or the preferences expressed in those surveys that nowadays come out more frequently would be representative of the Filipino voting population.
Yeah.
Professor Holmes, go ahead. Go ahead, Professor
Yeah,
Franco.
but the trouble, Ronnie, is that when it gets to be published, these results of the surveys are thought of by those who read these results as somehow similar to what other pollsters do, no? Yung methodology. Although it is indicated naman that it's a halimbawa online panel of respondents, but then sometimes people don't get to read that anymore. They react as if it's similar. Bakit iba yung result nito? Kaya parang it's not yet in the minds of the people that not all surveys are created equal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Professor Holmes, I don't know if I'm going to be asking you to violate some, ethical norms within your community of social scientists, but uh, there is a specific firm that highlights their self-selecting surveys. Uh, I wonder if you can speak to that.
Well, as I said, I think, and this is what we normally do when media would ask us about certain surveys. Of course, there's the ethical consideration, John, and I hope you
Sure.
understand. We'd rather not
Mhm.
comment on the work of others. We would rather define what are the questions that media should ask when
Mhm.
survey results come out. For example, we need to ask, media has to ask, what's your survey methodology? What's the
Mhm.
sample size? What are the questions that you ask? Because these are the ways by which you can try to determine whether the questions, for example, are leading, whether the methodology itself would allow you to generalize the survey results for the entire population. As I said, there are two ways of sampling, either probabilistic or non-probabilistic, or random and non-random. If it's non-random, that means you can only generalize for the sample that they took. If that sample happens to be 200,000, so it's only true for the 200,000 from where they got the respondents,
Mhm.
rather than from the 60 million that, let's say, a probabilistic survey, even if it got only 1,200 respondents, take would generalize, no? So those are the things that I think media should do, and that's the reason why in many surveys that we've done, we make it a point to even put our cell phone numbers there. Our technical details are also on our website. So I think media should be much more helpful in terms of educating the public in reading the surveys. Because there are occasions wherein, of course, we know that the public will have some difficulty because sometimes the projection of media is that in this survey, this candidate is winning, but there's no
Mhm.
description of the methodology. And that's a responsibility on the part of the survey institutions. It should be released publicly and in greater detail to the extent that it conforms to the rules of, let's say, public opinion research organizations worldwide.
Can I ask you the same question I asked Professor Franco about
Mhm.
use? How should citizens or political organizations use scientific, randomly selected probabilistic surveys like those of Pulse Asia?
Well, in for campaign organizations, for those who are running campaigns, surveys are quite important. They're part of the first step that you do in terms of campaigning. It's you need to segregate your voters, you need to target voters, and the surveys allow you to really target voters because like in your earlier segment, you were asking President Tito Soto for his standing in Mindanao that is getting 10%. That means that there has to be something done. If the survey results show that you're weak in this area, what can you do to increase the voting support in that area? And that's the point of research in doing campaigns, because campaigns are both basically science and art. The art is in terms of crafting your message, maybe based on actual readings of how the public would see you, and that can be done through surveys. That can be done through focus group discussions. With regard to the public, I think it would be best for them to reflect on whether the choices made by others are choices that should affect them. And in our own surveys, we find out that the surveys really do not necessarily or do not significantly influence voter behavior subsequently. I think voters are quite rational. They vote based on what they believe are the people who would serve their interests. Of course, in many instances, that those promises are failed, but I don't think that they're in any way affected by the surveys for that matter. It may be used as a guide, it may have a bandwagon, it may have an underdog effect, but I think it would be best for voters to vote for those who they think are really supposed to be rightfully in those elected positions.
Yeah, I think that's the paradox of surveys, right? I mean, uh, scientific surveys can be predictive in general precisely because most individuals are not influenced by the surveys. Otherwise, the survey numbers would change, right?
And then, John, there's another benefit specifically for the surveys that are closer to the elections. In a country where people basically disbelieve the actual election results, the surveys actually provide you a benchmark as to
Mhm.
whether that the election results, if the election results suddenly are quite distant from the survey that was conducted closest to the election itself, or some surveys are done as exit polls, then there's something awry in so far as the results itself. Then you should probe into what the basis of those differences are, especially if the survey was done in a very systematic fashion.
Thank you. Professor Franco, you've done work on the politics of gender. I wonder, just to throw an idea out there, do you think there's a gender bias to our surveys?
I don't think so. But it depends on how the candidates would, no, would interpret the surveys that they're getting. No? It depends on how their campaign managers would interpret the findings of the surveys that they have commissioned. But I think for as long as they also ask both men and women, then and both men and women have the equal chance to be respondents of particular survey project. I don't think there's gender bias at all. No.
Well, perhaps the better way of phrasing my question would be, do the surveys reflect gender bias in our society? Professors Holmes and Franco, I'm struck by, for instance, the demonization of women senators like Laila De Lima, Risa Ontiveros. Senator De Lima is not faring well right now. Senator Risa Ontiveros is doing better, but still, towards the end of the top 12, top 15. But then you have uh, uh, senators with scandalous reputations like Bong Revilla, Jingo Estrada, and they're doing quite well. They're in the top 8 and so on. So I wonder whether maybe the better question was, do the surveys reflect the gender bias or amplify the gender bias?
Yeah. In, to a certain extent, yes, it amplifies the gender bias. And we also must take note that Senator Laila De Lima has been really vilified for the past 6 years. No, in fact, there's already a name for what has been done to her. No, it has already been studied by scholars. Very recent, no, work of academics doing gender and politics. It's called violence against women in politics. No, and there is a clamor, no, from people from other countries, especially women's groups, to actually have a law punishing violence against women in politics. And it's no wonder that Laila De Lima is not, her numbers are not really very high in terms of polls. Well, Bong Revilla, is a different matter because he is a movie star, no, and he has been in show business for quite a long time already. With the fact that he was jailed, do not, I think, does not mean anything to his supporters, and also the way he sort of framed his being jailed as parang kawawa, or if he was a victim of politics, also seemed to have resonated well to his base. So that's the tragedy of it.
Thank you. Professor Holmes, maybe just one last question. What's the outlook like for the next Pulse Asia surveys? What can we expect?
Well, I don't know also what to expect, John.
No, I meant the schedule. Sorry,
The
not the result,
schedule,
but the
well, it
schedule.
should come out in the fourth quarter before Christmas. Whether it's a happy or a sad development would depend largely on the perspective of the public. But this is our fourth quarter Ulat ng Bayan. And then after this, we have surveys every month, as we have done in the past,
Mhm.
from January until late April of next year.
Okay, we're past our time. Thank you very much, Professor Ronnie Holmes, Professor Jean Encinas Franco. Enlightening discussion. Because of the weight that we put on surveys, I think we will definitely have you on the show again. Thank you, Ronnie Holmes, President of Pulse Asia, and Professor Jean Encinas Franco of the University of the Philippines.
Thanks,
Thank
John. Thanks.
you.
Bye.
That's it for us tonight. Follow us on the campaign trail because it isn't just elections as usual. Next week, we sit down with Cavite Governor John Vic Remulla. This is John Nery. Good night.